Hello everyone, welcome back to They Lot About Africa. I'm your host Numbe, and if nobody told you the real story, I will. Today's episode is going to be a little different, and I say this because if you've been listening, you know that this podcast usually dives deep into the root causes behind the narratives, the negative ones we've been fed about Africa. We've talked about youth unemployment, climate innovation, identity, language, all in ways meant to reframe how Africa is seen, especially by Gen Z. And the goal has always been to help people, especially those of us in the diaspora, realize that the Africa we've been taught to pity or overlook is actually overflowing with potential, brilliance, and with solutions. So if this is your first time here, definitely check out the past episodes after this one. But I just want to say that today's episode was not a part of the original plan. I was actually planning to release a breakdown on Africa's involvement in space tech and how it challenges every single outdated stereotype about what the continent is capable of. That episode is still coming, but today something else took priority. So today is currently Thursday, July 10th, 7 p.m. and I just came across a news clip. One that really, I'm not even gonna lie, irritated me. And I just had to pause and I was like, I gotta turn on this mic and we gotta talk about it. And specifically, it was a moment between President Donald Trump and Liberia's current president, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, Joseph Boakai. And it was a moment that went viral for a reason, but also a moment that many people still won't fully understand why it's problematic. And that's what I want to unpack today. And this also happens to be the very first episode in a new series I'm launching here on the podcast called Africa Now. This series is all about what's happening right now, the headlines, the viral clips, the trending conversations, moments that seem small but actually reveal something huge about how the world still sees Africa and how we as young people respond. Because sometimes the lie isn't historical. It's not buried in textbooks. It's happening in real time, in press conferences, in interviews, on timelines. And if we do not speak on it, we let the lie spread without resistance. So this series is especially for Gen Z Africans, those of us who are caught between continents, balancing cultures, watching the world misunderstand our heritage in real time. Africa Now is our way of reclaiming the present, not just rewriting the past. So before I continue, I just want to offer a quick disclaimer, especially for anyone listening who may not know me personally or who's coming across this podcast in a professional context. This episode, like every episode of They Lied About Africa, is rooted in curiosity, reflection, and truth-seeking. I'm not here to attack any individual, political figure, or government. That's not my goal. That is not my spirit. I'm here to unpack a moment that went viral and to explore what it reveals about how Africa is still perceived, especially when it comes to language, leadership, and identity. And as a young African in the diaspora, I believe it's important for all of us to reflect on how the world sees us and how we see ourselves. So this episode is not political commentary. My objective is not to sound like a political mouthpiece. It's an opportunity for deeper understanding and for anyone listening a chance to reflect, not react. Everything I share is from a place of care, for truth, for dignity, and for the next generation of Africans and diaspora youth who deserve to take up space, speak freely, and be understood on their own terms. Now, let's listen to what actually happened. I'm going to play the clip of essentially what this whole episode is going to be about and we'll be referring to.
And also, we want to encourage American involvement in the investment in Liberia. Yeah. We'd like to see that happen. We want to work with the United States in peace and security within the region because we are committed to that. And we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. That's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well,
Very
and
good, sir. Thank you.
they come from here. So thank you very much.
So, I know. It was... Let's talk about it, okay? Not just the soundbite, but the setting and the context around that. I want to talk about that first. So, essentially, President Joseph Boakai of Liberia was at the White House as part of a meeting with 4 other West African leaders, and the goal of the meeting was not to celebrate innovation or build new trade partnerships. It was largely focused on migration and deportation, and it was still a significant moment because African leaders were sitting down at one of the most powerful tables in the world. Now, who is President Boakai? He's not new to this. He has been involved in Liberian politics for over 40 years. He served as vice president from 2006 to 2018 and was elected president in 2023. He studied both in Liberia and the United States. He actually graduated from Kansas State University, and he spent his life working in public service, education, and development. This is not a man who needs to prove himself, especially not in a room full of diplomats. In Liberia, English is the country's official language. That is not an opinion. That's a fact. And everyone in that room should have known that. So when President Boakai starts speaking clearly, eloquently, President Donald Trump interrupts to say, "That's such good English. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully?" Boakai, he calmly responded saying, "Liberia." And Trump doubled down and said, "That's very interesting. I have people at this table who can't even speak nearly as well." Bro. The first question he asks assumes that English fluency is a surprise, that it's something unusual, something worth pointing out. It may sound polite on the surface, but it is rooted in a deeper assumption that an African leader, or perhaps an African in general, is not expected to speak English with clarity or confidence. That is a microaggression, and it reflects a colonial mindset, one that ties language to intelligence and intelligence to Westernness. It's the idea that fluency, articulation, and education are things that Africans must have acquired from somewhere else rather than qualities they already possess, especially when English is the official language of their country. And the second part, that's the part when Trump says, "I have people at this table who can't speak nearly as well." Let me remind you who was sitting at that table. They were not random guests. They were heads of state, presidents of sovereign African nations, men who oversee economies, negotiate trade, manage crises, and represent millions of citizens on the world stage. Among them were leaders who studied at top universities across the globe, leaders fluent in multiple languages, English, French, Arabic, Wolof, Portuguese, who speak to international audiences every single day. So when Trump says that none of them can speak as well as the Liberian president, that was not a clumsy compliment. He's minimizing the intelligence and credibility of everyone in that room. He turned a formal diplomatic moment into something performative. It uses one man's speech as a spectacle and reduces the rest of the room to a punchline. It is not a compliment. It's a message, whether he meant it or not. And I know some of y'all might be thinking, girl, it's not that deep. You shouldn't be getting heated over this. He probably didn't mean anything by it. But let me ask you this. If Beyonce was to walk into a room full of executives and somebody interrupted her mid-sentence to be like, "Wow, you speak so well. Where did you learn to do that?" What would your reaction be? Exactly. Because when someone's earned their place, they've already proven their capability when they're already in the room. That kind of surprise is not flattering. It is highly offensive. And if we wouldn't accept it in pop culture, we should not accept it, especially in diplomacy. I know that was a little heated, but now I want to talk about Liberia. Like, why? Like, cause if y'all really do some research on Liberia, you will see it is like literally an imitation of the United States. Liberia, for one, speaks English. Legally, nationally, and officially. So the whole "where did you learn to speak so beautifully" rhetoric or energy was already off. It's like walking up to a barista at Dunkin' and being like, "Oh my God, you really know how to pour coffee?" Of course, that's literally their job. What do you expect? But no, seriously, let's pause and give some context, because even though that question was wild, it's also rooted in something deeper. Here's what you need to know. Liberia didn't just choose English because it sounded fancy. It became an English-speaking country because of a very specific, very American history. In the early 1800s, it became an English-speaking country because of a very specific, very American history. In the early 1800s, freed Black Americans were sent, and in some cases, pressured to migrate to West Africa. Did y'all know that? That migration also was backed by the American Colonization Society and the U.S. government support, which led to the founding of Liberia. That country was literally modeled after the U.S. It's his doppelganger. It's a carbon copy. The flag, the constitution, the leadership, structure. That's why its capital is called Monrovia, after U.S. President James Monroe. And that's why English is the national language, not just as a result of colonialism by the British, but because of direct U.S. involvement. So when President Boakai started speaking, the surprise wasn't misplaced. It was historically inaccurate. And that question, "where did you learn to speak so beautifully?" you missed a whole chapter of shared history that the U.S. helped write. But okay, That's the history. Now, let's shift to the Liberia people don't talk about enough. First of all, like I mentioned, Liberia is an English-speaking country that's on the books, in the schools, in the streets. So when someone reacts with surprise, especially someone in a leadership role, it says more about their assumptions than it does about Liberia. Imagine somebody coming to your house, sitting on your couch and saying, wow, you really know how to use a microwave. Sir, I live here. What are you talking about? That's how that moment felt. It's like watching somebody be shocked that a person is thriving in a space they were born to be in. And also, the world doesn't usually tell you about the Liberia that's still standing. Liberia has survived civil wars, Ebola, political instability, and keeps showing up, keeps rebuilding. And what most of the world sees as a cautionary tale is actually a case study in resilience. And young Liberians, they're not sitting around waiting to be lifted up. They're building businesses, organizing grassroots movements, designing fashion lines, launching tech solutions, and telling stories all on their own terms. That's creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation. But because it's not flashy, because it's not Western approved, it doesn't trend, obviously. But it's there and it's real. So when that comment was made, I had people at this table who can't speak nearly as well. It didn't just miss the point. It flattened the whole nation. It said, I only notice excellence when I didn't expect it from you. And that's a mindset we need to dismantle every time it shows up. Now, if you're in the diaspora, I need you to listen, because this matters for you too. Because how the world treats your leaders, that energy trickles down. It's a whole domino effect. If a president can sit in a White House meeting and still be reduced to a backhanded compliment, what do you think they assume when you walk into a room? How many of us have heard, oh, wow, you're so articulate when you speak. You speak so clearly for someone who came from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Senegal, from Liberia. It's always wrapped in a smile, but underneath it's the belief that you're not supposed to sound like that. That to be African and confident, African and fluent, African and unapologetically sharp is somehow unexpected. And that is the problem. Because when people are only impressed when you exceed their low expectations, that's not praise, that's projection. And to my Liberians listening, I'm gonna need y'all to come to the front, because I know that moment in that clip was frustrating. I would be too if it was my president that was told that. I know it probably made you shake your head, roll your eyes, or feel like, oh my God, here we go again. But don't let anybody's ignorance define your pride. You don't need to prove yourselves to anyone. You don't need to shrink, over explain, or translate your intelligence to make people feel comfortable. You've been building and we see you. This episode is for you too. Now, I want to switch over to another segment, language, power, and what we do with it. In this podcast, I don't just talk about what's wrong. I try to find ways for us, especially as Gen Z Africans in the diaspora, to have these conversations and actually walk away with something powerful, with tangible steps. So let's talk about what this moment really teaches us. Not just about Liberia, not just about Trump, but about language, power, and perception. Because here's the truth. The world doesn't just hear how you speak. It uses how you speak to decide what you're worth. Your voice, your accent, your fluency, these things become currency. And the more you seem to sound like what they expect, the more qualified you seem, the more you sound like them, the more intelligent you're perceived. And if you don't, they question your competence, they doubt your education, they assume you're less. And it starts early. Some of us, myself included, learned how to code switch in elementary school. Some of us had teachers who called us difficult to understand because we didn't sound like the default. Or some of us were told to change our names or shorten them so they'd be easier to pronounce. And when we finally mastered the language, when we spoke perfectly, we were still surprised with, wow, you're so articulate. It is exhausting. So I want to talk about what we do with that. Number one, we need to stop seeing English as an achievement. You are not smart because you speak English. You are smart, period. English is just a tool, a colonially imposed one. At that, many of us were forced to speak it before we even learned our own language. So while yes, we use it, yes, we operate in it, yes, it's a global connector, and yes, I am so grateful that I'm able to express myself in this language and speak this language and gather my thoughts in this language. Let's not confuse fluency with superiority. Don't let your ability to sound like what the world expects to be the reason you forget how brilliant you already are. Number two is we need to start hearing ourselves with more compassion. Some of you are insecure about your accent or the fact that you speak another language at home. Some of you hesitate before speaking in class or at work because you don't want to sound too African. Some of you water yourself down, change how you say things, mimic American slang or British Polish just to avoid judgment. But why? The moment you believe your accent makes you less, they already won. Because it was never about understanding. It was always about control. And the last one, the third and final thing I want to say, if this moment between Trump and the Liberian president showed us anything, it's that no amount of fluency will protect you from someone else's ignorance. I'm sorry. It won't. So you need to stop shrinking to make people feel comfortable. You need to stop over explaining to prove your intelligence. And you need to stop being surprised when you show up and do well. You were meant to. Language is power. Yes, but it's also a weapon, and you don't have to keep turning it inward. Whether you speak one language or 5, whether your English is accented, neutral, or multilingual messy, whether you're still trying to figure it out or correcting someone else's grammar in your head, you deserve to be in that room. You deserve to be understood, and you deserve to be heard. So yeah, this wasn't just about a one-off comment at a press event or a meeting. It was just, it wasn't just about Trump, and it definitely wasn't just about English. This was a reminder that Africa is still misunderstood, that Africans are still underestimated, and that even when we're in the room, speaking clearly, leading nations, carrying degrees, showing up sharp and steady, the world can still act surprised. And that's why my series, Africa Now, that I just started with this episode, exists. Because if we don't talk about these moments in real time, if we don't pause and say, no, that was not okay, here's why, then these moments keep happening repeatedly without pushback or anyone being held accountable. But not here. This is the space where we take back the mic. So if you're Gen Z, if you're African, if you're in the diaspora and you're tired of being seen as the unexpectedly intelligent, I hope this episode reminded you that you were never the problem, that you never had to earn the right to be taken seriously, and that speaking well does not make you exceptional, it makes you visible, and that's a start. And to my Liberians, you already know what it is. You don't need to explain your country to anyone. You don't need to soften the power of your voice to make others feel more at ease. You've been building, and we see you. I see you. And to everyone else, I hope this gave you something to think about, something to question, and something to carry, because moments like this don't need to just go viral. They need to go deeper. All right, that is everything. Thank you so much for listening to the very first episode, Africa Now series. Thanks for listening to me rant on They Lied About Africa. More will be coming, and next time we're going to space. Literally. Africa and space tech is next on the lineup, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. And until then, I want you to keep speaking boldly, being proud of where you come from. Keep questioning the narrative. And remember that Africa is not behind. The world has just not caught up yet. Also, don't forget to follow They Lied About Africa on Instagram and on TikTok if you want to watch some short clips from the episodes. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'll see you next week.